Okay, thanks very much for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you very much for joining us this evening for our first Bord Bia sheep farmer webinar. My name is Joe Burke. I'm the Senior Manager for Meat and Livestock in Bord Bia. And I'll very briefly run through our agenda for this evening. I'm joined by a couple of my colleagues. So first of all, our first speaker is going to be Seamus McMenamin. And Seamus is our sector manager for sheep meat. So he's going to give us a market outlook. And thankfully, things have been very positive to date in 2021. So we're going to hear a bit about what the outlook is like to the end of the year from Seamus. From then, we're going to get an update from a quality assurance and more importantly, even sustainability and looking forward at Origin Green and our sustainability program and how that relates to the sheep meat sector. And Eleanor Murphy is our colleague from our Origin Green team who's going to give us an update on that. And finally, we're going to speak to Brian Nicholson. Brian is a lamb producer, a sheep farmer in County Kilkenny. So we'll then speak to Brian to get an update on his farm. Thankfully, Brian has helped us out in the marketing of Irish lamb on a number of occasions in the past. We have some video footage there that we've used to introduce Brian's farm to buyers. Particularly in the last 18 months, we haven't been able to do any buyer visits and overseas buyers coming over and to show them farms and so on. So a lot of that has been done digitally. So welcome to our webinar. And I suppose very briefly, just to remind you that we're using obviously a webinar platform, and you can input your questions using, there's a box there, and it has a number of drop-down arrows, but one of them is questions, and you can put in your questions through that function, or alternatively, our colleague has a text number there in the chat function within the platform as well, and you can text your questions either. So we'll just do a few questions and answers at the end, so feel free to send in any queries that you may have as we're going through the presentations. We hope to go through it nice and lively and to be finished up at about 8:30 or in about an hour's time. So I'm going to pass you over now to Seamus, our sheep meat manager.
Thanks very much, Joe. I'm hoping this works okay. If you just want to move the slide on there, Amanda. Thanks everyone for joining us this evening. I'm just going to start off this evening's proceedings just with a brief overview of the market conditions at the minute and sort of the outlook for the rest of the year. So first of all, we'll just give an update on sort of where we are and what 2021's been like so far. First of all, there's been a notable decline in throughput just for the year to date. The hogwood kill is probably back in the region of about 80,000 head. Two real contributing reasons for this. There was a smaller carryover of hoggods just from 2020 into this year, just off the back of a fairly good summer last year and good grass growth, and producers decided to kill lambs a bit earlier and a bit lighter. So that left us basically with a smaller carryover into this year. And then on top of that, then there's been reduced imports of lambs from Northern Ireland. Those are back about 35,000 head for the year to date. Just compared to previous years, there's just been firm demand and good prices for lambs in Northern Ireland and competition from the processors there to keep the lambs. So we've seen a decline in the number of sheep coming down the road for direct slaughter. And in addition to that, spring lamb supplies have then been fairly slow to come forward. There was a few weeks earlier than usual. There was some spring lambs appeared, and then it's been slow since that. I suppose the May weather and this slow grass growth maybe impacted lamb performance and slowed lambs down on farms by a few weeks. In addition to that, there's reports of underfinished lambs being presented for slaughter. Just producers maybe are just trying to make the most of the high prices and are pushing lambs forward for slaughter. and it's been reflected in the average carcass weights as well. The average carcass weight for the last 8 weeks is only 20 kilos, so it's back half a kilo from the same period last year. That's for price reported lambs. Overall, however, we would expect there to be a larger lamb crop this year, as we'll touch on later. So we would expect throughput to increase strongly now as we move into June and into the summer months. So overall, for the year to date, our sheep meat production from lambs and hoggets is back about 10%, and our yo meat or sheep meat production is back by 7%. Next slide there, Linda, please. So as I touched on, the very tight supplies for the year to date have just kept deadmeat prices very strong. This combined with sort of stable demand for sheep meat has just kept prices at sort of exceptional levels for most of the year. You'll see from the chart there, they're trending well above previous years. For the year to date, the average lamb and hogget price has just been short of €7 a kilo, and the same period last year was €5.42. So just emphasises the strength of the trade at the minute. Quotes and the processors are expected to be for a QA lamb in the region of €7.25 to €7.30 a kilo. This time last year they were in around €6 a kilo. There's a few factors that have contributed just to the strong deadmeat trade. One is, as I said, the stable demand for sheep meat. There's been fairly good demand from the domestic retail sector and also from the export markets, particularly the EU. There's been lower lamb availability in the EU just due to lower production, and also lighter or lower imports, particularly from New Zealand, off the back of just tighter global supplies. So it's supply and demand has really dictated the strength of the trade. The lower production and the lower maybe availability of sheep meat does may have impacted consumption slightly in the EU. That's expected to be back slightly, but that's just due to the reduced visibility on shelves, just due to less availability. So overall, our exports for 2021, these figures are for the first 4 months of the year. It's been a very positive start to the year in terms of value, just driven by that strong deadweight price. So overall, the value of our exports is up by just over 11% to 126 million. However, just with the lower throughput and the sort of tighter supplies, there's been a 10% reduction in the volume that we've exported. So where you're looking at about 21,000 tonnes for the first 4 months of the year. There has been some reports of some resistance just to the strong prices from some major customers in the EU. But just the tight global supplies has meant that our product has continued to go there and sell well. There has been a growing interest in QA lamb, and my colleague Eleanor will touch more on the QA scheme and where we are with that later on. But there's been growing interest from particularly European retailers just regarding QA lamb and the sustainability credentials that can come along with that. As I touched on, the EU remains our strongest export market, as you'll see in the chart there. Our exports have grown to 95 million just for the first part of 2021. And there has ever been some encouraging growth in some of the international markets as well, particularly Switzerland and then in some of the Asian markets. So I'll just give a brief update now on our domestic market. Just these are Kantar sales, so these are based on retail sales. Early in the year, the retail sector had been performing quite well. However, in the latest data, the latest 12-week data up to the middle of May there, the strong prices have had an impact on retail sales and the reduced availability of product. So you'll see there that the overall spend is back by 5% and the volume back by 10%. Now there is some encouraging things coming out of this. Just the number of buyers has increased slightly. Our household penetration is more or less the same, and the number of households buying lamb has increased. So there are some positives there as well. I'll just touch now just on some of the key markets for sheep meat, and just their impact on the global sort of the global trade. Just sheep meat's become sort of a global trading commodity, so China may be far away, but it has a huge impact on the prices that we got for our lambs. So China is probably the key driver on the global sheep meat trade. In 2020 they took more than a third of all the sheep meat imported globally off the market. There has been some growth in their domestic production, however they're reliant on imports just for the balance. There's also been a small growth in per capita consumption up slightly in 2021, and that's just been driven by an increase in urbanization and an increase in the spending power of a lot of Chinese consumers, and that's contributed then to a firm consumer demand for lamb. Towards the end of 2020, the imports to China were running slightly behind, but they picked up very strongly in 2021, and have been performing really well, particularly from New Zealand and Australia. We talked to them in the UK. They're our biggest competitor on the EU market, and last year there was a 12% decline in what they sent into the EU, which gave Irish exporters some great opportunities to gain market share. There's been an increased focus on their domestic retail market in particular, and that's sort of and then they've got reduced production, so they basically just less sheep meat available to export, and this is expected to continue into 2021 with a further 4% decline expected in their exports this year. So now for New Zealand, there was an overall decline in their exports in 2020, and this is expected to decline by further 4 or 5% in 2021, just off the back of flock rebuilding and a poor lamb crop. And then their exports to the EU have been in a steady decline as they've redirected product into China and some other Asian markets. So you'll see there in 2020, just over New Zealand ended up in China, and just 11% in the EU, and further 11% in the UK. Regards to Australia, then there was a decline in the availability for export in 2020, and there is some recovery expected in 2021, just off the back of increased lamb availability, but it's not expected to get back to 2019 levels. There's continued flock rebuilding going on. However, their share of the global market is increasing. So as you'll see there, more than a third of everything Australia exported last year also ended up in China. So now our outlook for 2021. There's been an increase in the yoke flock just from the December census there, so it's up by 2.8%. Those lower yoke cullings last year and higher yoke lamb retention rates, we sort of had thought there'd be a bigger yoke flock, and then you add in on top of that the reports of a better scamming rate and fairly good lambing conditions, and we're looking to have a fairly good lamb crop this year. In addition to that, then the imports from NI are expected to remain low. The three major processors in Northern Ireland are keen to source and retain lambs in Northern Ireland, so that will reduce the volume of lambs coming down the road. So our price prospects, obviously, we're coming off a very high price point at the minute, and then prices are expected to come back as supplies pick up. But I wouldn't expect prices to come back maybe to previous year, what we've seen in previous years. There's a global tightness in supply and a redirection of production to Asian markets instead of the EU, so it reduces the availability of product. And then the EU have also indicated tighter lower production levels for this year. And then we've got the Muslim festivals such as Eid in July to take into consideration. So overall trade will be dictated by supply and demand, and just trying to get our lamb into the highest price markets. So our export prospects then for 2021, as I've mentioned already, China continues to impact the global sheep meat trade, just by its sheer scale. And then the EU remains our priority market, just with opportunities to displace the UK, and as I said, then lower availability of product in general. And then just regarding exports, then we'll continue to engage with the department in access in China and the US. So that brings me to an end of my presentation. So So now we're going to play a short promotional video, just promoting the QA scheme, and then we'll go straight through to my colleague Eleanor Murphy, who'll take you through the QA scheme and update on changes there.
It is not enough to claim that Irish lamb is produced to a high standard. We need to show proof. The Bord Bia Sustainable Beef and Lamb Assurance Scheme provides that proof. Shoppers and buyers choose the Bord Bia quality mark because it shows them that the lamb is reared in Ireland by progressive farmers who care for the health and welfare of their animals and the environment. 93% of Irish shoppers recognise the quality mark, and 73% are more likely to buy quality mark lamb. International food buyers also demand quality assurance and sustainability standards, and the Sustainable Beef and Lamb Assurance Scheme, also known as SBLAS, meets these requirements. SBLAS is designed to fit the busy lives of farmers. Membership of SBLAS takes commitment, but is designed to work for sheep farmers and pay dividends. There are several benefits to joining SBLAS, including improved record keeping, a farm health check, advice on farm safety, and a quality bonus payment. As a member of SBLAS, you can satisfy the gap in the market for quality mark lamb and benefit from support that strengthens your enterprise. Join now by contacting the Bord Bia Help Desk on 01 524 0410. Open Monday to Friday, 9 AM to 8 PM.
Now, and oh, yeah, thanks. Can you move? Yeah, thank you, Enda. Okay, hi everyone, and thanks very much for joining us this evening. My name is Eleanor Murphy. I'm the Origin Green Data Manager under the Quality Assurance and Origin Green team here in Bord Bia. I'm just going to go through an overview of the SBLAS membership, our audit history, a little bit of detail on our remote auditing sequences as a result of COVID-19, and then look at some of the requirements of the scheme, some non-compliance compliances, and then discuss the new lamb carbon footprint model, which was announced in the last number of weeks. I'll give you some detail about the functionality of the model and give you an idea of the use of the model for the requirements of the market. So I can, yeah. So you can see here on this screen just the distribution of members to the SBLAS scheme. So when we talk about SBLAS, we talk about Sustainable Beef and Lamb Assurance Scheme, and currently there are 51,360 members of the beef and lamb scheme, including beef and lamb. When you look at beef and lamb members only, there's 11,990 members. So that's replicated there in the map on the left, with the intensity of the darkness of the color represents the higher memberships. So higher membership for beef and lamb members in SBLAS in Galway and Mayo and Donegal. And then when we look at lamb only members, there are 2,164 members of SBLAS that are just producing lamb, with the highest density of those members in Mayo, followed by Donegal and Galway. Is that me? Next slide, please, Enda. So of the, in last year in 2020, this kind of links into what Seamus was talking about. Over 2.8 million sheep animals were presented for slaughter to the factories, and 60% of the total kill was recognised as quality assured. So we'd like to see these numbers increase as the requirements for the market looks for membership to SBLAS over time. To give an update on the SBLAS audits as they are, so we've had remote auditing going on farm since May 2020, And at the moment, on-site audits are resuming from May the 17th, 2021. This is based on an opt-in functionality by the farmer. When the auditor rings the farmer, they can choose to have an on-site audit or a remote audit. So just to give you an idea, I suppose very much the remote audits are still the most common form of audits that are happening. To date, there's been 42,893 remote audits since May 2020 and 1,844 on-site audits. Hopefully, as things open up, we'll see that increase in on-site audits. But to give an idea, 13% of the on-site audits were beef and lamb audits, and 2% of the on-site audits were lamb-only audits. The other thing to bear in mind when you're a member of SPLAS is on the date of your audit, any non-compliances that are raised by the auditor, the farmer is given 30 days to close out the non-compliances. So this means that you have a bit of time to remedy the non-compliances that were identified on the farm, and this really helps get the farmers over the line and achieve certification to the SPLAS standard. So on average, the help desk is making and receiving over 8,000 calls a month. They're very helpful to members of the scheme to help with the closeout or filling in the sustainability survey or setting up audits. And they can be reached on 01 525 0401. Next slide, please. So then just to go through, I suppose, 5 of the main non-compliances that we're seeing on beef and lamb farms. So certainly, and this is recognised in the dairy schemes as well, is the remedy usage records would be, or the maintenance of the remedy usage records would be the most common non-compliance in SPLAS for beef and lamb farms. So essentially what the auditor is looking for here is to make sure that for each remedy that's used, the date of use, the name of the registered medicine, the quantity given to the animal, the identification of the animal or the group of animals, the name of the person applying or administering the medicine, or the name of the prescribing vet, followed by the date of the end of the withdrawal period. So there's a note there that a common mistake is to insert the number of days of withdrawal instead of the date that the withdrawal period ends. The next most common non-compliance looks at the record keeping of the remedies that are purchased. So similarly to the last point, the records required here are the date of the purchase, the recognized medicine name, the quantity purchased, and the name and the address of the supplier. The third most common non-compliance seen then is a system of recording ovine movements. So each member of SPLAS with a sheep flock on their farm must have a system of recording ovine movements that addresses the requirements of the National Sheep Identification System needs. The fourth most common non-compliance then is having the details of the remedy usage record correct. So you may have the remedy use partially recorded, or you may have part of it missing. So it's just maintaining and making sure that each of the details that are required are present and correct. And again, to make note of the date of the end of withdrawal should be the date rather than the number of days that the withdrawal applies. And the fifth and final most common non-compliance is having an up-to-date farm safety risk assessment or farm safety statement. This is now a legal requirement, and it's aimed at reducing the risk of injury or ill health to those who work on the farm. And more information can be found on the Health and Safety Authority of Ireland website or on www.farmsafely.com, where you can fill out the form. So then just to introduce the lamb carbon footprint model for members of the scheme already who may have beef animals, you'll be familiar with filling in the sustainability survey and receiving a carbon footprint for your beef enterprise. So now we're launching a lamb carbon footprint to supply the same level of detail back to their lamb members. So it'll be introduced this summer. The lamb carbon footprint essentially will model all of the emissions coming from the farm activity on your farm and divide it by the output of that farm. So the unit measured will be kg of CO2 per kg of live weight. The model itself is certified to the Carbon Trust to the PAS 2050 standard. This means that it's an internationally recognized standard, and it means that we can communicate the carbon footprint of LAM members and SBLAS members internationally and to markets. The objective of introducing the LAM carbon footprint is to help increase the participation in the scheme, enhance the marketability, sustainability, and the strong global reputation of the Irish sheep sector. And the data that will be required for the input into the carbon footprint model will be gathered through the sustainability survey. And to give you an idea, before I go into some detail on the sustainability survey about what an expected LAM carbon footprint is. So Donal O'Brien and Teagasc released a paper a number of years ago tracking a life cycle assessment or a carbon footprint model of lowland lamb and hill lamb, and found a carbon footprint of lowland lamb at 10.4 kgs of CO2 per kg of live weight, a carbon footprint of hill lamb at 14.2 kgs of CO2 per kg of live weight. And then to give a preliminary result, which I must stress is not representative of the industry, just to give an idea of what our own model is getting at already with about 30 test herds, we're generating an average carbon footprint of 13.5 kgs of CO2 per kg of live weight. And the graph underneath just gives a demonstration of the share of emissions. With any ruminant system, the share of emissions will all be strongly linked to enteric fermentation. So that's the digestion of the feed in the animal's gut. And that's taking up on average about 61% of the lamb carbon footprint, with the other emissions then distributed out to manure related emissions, fertilizer related emissions, and then general related emissions. Next slide, please. Thank you. So then just to link back into the sustainability survey and to provide a bit of clarity. So already I mentioned the sustainability data is collected on beef and dairy farms for the SBLAS and SDAS. The sustainability survey collects data on the previous production year. So if you have an audit in 2021, the data that we would require would be for the production year 2020. The sustainability survey will be required for each audit, and for members of SBLAS with a lamb scope to their audit, there'll be an additional 19 lamb related questions for the lamb enterprise. And this data can be collected as part of the online sustainability survey, which can be filled out at farm.bordbia.ie. And a paper version can be filled in prior to the audit or as part of the closeout. And a paper version can be requested from the help desk on the phone number displayed on the slide. And to give a little bit of detail of what the sustainability survey looks like online, you can see here the first page. We're looking for some enterprise information. We expect that the lamb section of the survey shouldn't be too taxing, a maximum of 20 minutes, depending on whether or not you have some of the data to hand. There's a checklist available to you as you log on, so you can have that data ready as you fill it in. So we collect information on the enterprise type, the dominant lambing enterprise, and we also collect information on the housing requirements of your flock, the animal numbers, the productivity, silage cutting, and then feed rates as well. And all of that data then is inputted into the carbon footprint to generate the emissions coming from the productivity of lamb, and therefore generate the carbon footprint for our members. And then finally then, to encourage you to join, you can contact AgriData for a phone application. Phone number for AgriData is 062 54900. You can also contact the help desk, which can take an application over the phone. And you can also download an application form from the SBLAS overview page on bordbia.ie. you will require a valid herd number and your herd owner contact details to complete the application form, and that can be sent in to AgriData or emailed into the AgriData office, and the details of the email will be available on the form. So that's it from me to just give a summary of the membership of SBLAS and the up and coming carbon footprint information for lamb members. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Eleanor, for that overview. And both Eleanor and Seamus are going to stay with us. Again, if you have any questions for any of the speakers, feel free to input them into the platform here, or likewise you can text them via the number that appears in the chat function. And what we have coming up next is we have a short video which comes from Brian Nicholson's farm. Brian is going to be joining me in a minute, but this video is basically a promotional piece of footage that we produced in order to just give a flavour of how Irish lamb is produced to, I suppose, both buyers and consumers, so that they better understand it. And thankfully, it is well understood, and it's seen in a very positive light, I suppose, both here in the home market as well as in our export markets. And just to remind you that our help desk, if any of you have any quality assurance related queries, is 01 524 0410. And the text number, in case any of you have any questions to text through, is 087 645 0170. So thanks, Eleanor, and hopefully we should now be able to play our video of Brian's farm.
Farming is all about marrying the best of nature and technology to produce quality products. Since I was a kid, I've been out around the farm helping out, be it feeding cattle or sheep. I always enjoyed being outside. I'm the third generation to be farming here. The fourth generation is on the ground at the moment. Here on the farm, we're producing grass-fed lamb. There's 100 hectares of grassland. We'd have 5-6 hectares of arable ground and then another 15 hectares of forestry. The lamb here in Europe is produced at the highest quality, and it's rich in flavour and it's a premium product. The lambs are born in the spring, and within 24 hours of being born, they're out in the fields. Outdoors in grass fields produces happy, content animals. On the farm we have a variety of different grasses grown. We have monocultures, multi-species mixes with white and red clovers. We measure the grass once a week and soil sample a third of the farm every year to monitor how soil fertility is on the farm. The sheep have fresh grass continually while they rotate around the farm. Grass-fed brings a lovely flavour and richness to the meat that's produced. There's a lot of mature woodlands on the farm and mature hedgerows which feed birds and small mammals. So there's a full ecosystem here on the farm. Origin Green is Ireland's food and drink sustainability programme. It helps to give us guidelines on where we can improve the farm in a sustainable way. Well, technology is a major part of the farm here, and it's utilised to its utmost to make the farm very efficient. We electronic tag all the lambs here at birth on the farm, and it provides us with full traceability from the dam to the lamb to the plate on the table. You can see that All the hard work and hours you put in is worthwhile. It's something to be very proud of, to be able to do and to feed not just one nation but many nations.
Very good. So that was an overview anyway of Brian's farm as part of a piece of footage that we produced a few years ago. And I suppose from that impressive and kind of idyllic picture of Irish lamb production, we're going to be joined by Brian now in the flesh, so to speak, on the webinar. So good evening, Brian. Thanks a million for tuning in and for joining us here. Albeit that we're both in our respective houses, but it's great to catch up with you anyway. And thanks very much for helping us out. That wasn't obviously the first piece of footage that you did for us. You've done a few other ones as well in the meantime, including for Origin Green.
Yeah. It's a pleasure to do it there. I mean, and to help promote what we're producing here on the farm. It can only benefit us all.
Yeah, thanks a million. Thanks very much, Brian. And we got a nice picture anyway of your system. You're the third generation, as you say, and thankfully of the fourth generation, hopefully coming along as well too, to hopefully give a hand and take up the mantle at some stage anyway in the future. That's brilliant.
Yeah, sure. You never know. All going well, they'll see something that they're interested in going forward on the farm and maybe take it on.
Brilliant. And we got a bit of an overview of your system, but yeah, so you're farming about 100 hectares rather of grassland. Brian, what kind of numbers of ewes are you running? And maybe give us an indication, maybe from this year, what kind of an experience you've had from when the maybe ewes lambed down to how you've been getting on as regards grassland management and so on. Just the kind of, I suppose, dates and timelines, and whether you've maybe started selling any lambs yet.
Yeah, so we're putting just shy of 1,000 ewes to the ram there every autumn, and then we're running 250 dry hoggets then behind them, and they lamb down from March, so they're lamb down kind of between the start of March and mid-April. Majority of them are lamb down. And straight out to the fields, weather dependent, of course. This was a bit harder than normal. The weather didn't play ball at the very start. It was wet and cold, and the newborn lambs aren't too fond of that. But we got over it, we got them out, and they're doing well. The grass growth and that was behind for a lot of the spring and the early summer there. Just with the cold weather again, it just put a little bit of pressure on the system, but we always had enough in front of them. That's where the grassland management really comes into play. So we have probably 80 to 90% of the winter forage saved now already for next winter, and the first couple of drafts of lambs have gone there now. The second lot are off there now tomorrow morning to the factory.
Great.
So yeah, we're on track.
Excellent. Yeah, and obviously, sure, it's very early days yet. You don't count your chickens, as the old saying goes, but obviously off to a very strong start. We heard from Seamus's kind of numbers there, and I'm sure you're finding likewise kind of prices up 20 and even 25% on last year. So hopefully, that strong momentum anyway can be maintained, and that right through the season, hopefully prices can stay well ahead of last year's levels.
Yeah, that would be the hope, and you know, looking at the information that's there, to know with the reduction in output in some of the other big producing countries, it's probably a positive for us, and at the moment anyway, and hopefully going forward, you know, we can build on it and keep things tipping along nicely.
Yeah, very good. And I suppose lastly, Brian, before I bring back the other couple of speakers, because we have a couple of questions in from our audience, both via our function here as well as on the text. But I suppose your kind of overall impression or your kind of summary, what do you think of the idea of using sustainability, I suppose, to promote Irish lamb? And your kind of impression, I suppose, so far of being a member of the sustainable, I suppose, lamb assurance scheme. It's a beef and lamb assurance scheme, but it's the lamb part of it, obviously, that you'd be most focused on. Have you found, I suppose, overall, have you found much extra work in it and the kind of downside to it? And on the other hand, you know, do you feel as a farmer that, you know, we're getting the benefit of promoting ourselves as being natural and sustainable lamb producers?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of positives to it there. You know, being ahead of the curve when we're promoting our lamb abroad, being able to show our sustainability, and that is beneficial in getting in there ahead of other countries. I suppose when it comes to the audits and that, you know, the on-farm audit is so much easier than the online one. But it's the where we are at the moment, isn't it? To be able to be able to do the audit is just keeping things going, and that to see what somebody else would see yourself isn't always that straightforward. That having that extra set of eyes around the place to pinpoint somewhere that you might be able to improve on is always nice to have.
Yeah, definitely, Brian. And as you said, the option will be there now for farmers to opt for the physical audit again. We were forced to only close it up and only have the option of an online audit. Sure, there are advantages to the online one at times, but yeah, certainly the human, you know, factor isn't there physically. You know, somebody coming out and actually meeting them and talking to them in I suppose a less rushed kind of a pace. There's definitely advantages to that. All right, yeah, definitely. I might just welcome back my two colleagues because I have a few questions here for them as well, Brian, and we can go through each of them. And thanks very much, Brian. Thanks a million for your time, and likewise for always being so helpful and supportive. And we've had numerous buyers and visitors down to Brian's farm, and just the impression that it gives about Irish lamb. We always get, you know, really positive feedback. So maybe a question, Seamus, for you, just through here on the question function. Was that there are less live sheep having been imported from Northern Ireland. Can you tell us what's the situation been like as regards import of sheep meat, as well as the live sheep into Ireland?
Yeah, well, if you look at the latest figures available, which are for the first 4 months of the year, I think there's somewhere in the region of about 700 tons have come in, and it does sound like a lot, but if you compare it back to previous years, it's actually well reduced. So it was 990 the same period last year, and 1500 in the few years before that. So it's an important part of the market because it helps keep supply maybe at certain times where there's not the production here, but it's been much reduced this year, and that's been reflected just in the data that's coming through.
Okay, yeah, thanks very much for that. And maybe one for you again, Seamus, if that's okay. You alluded to this one at the end of your presentation, I know, but with regard to market access, can you give us any update of how we're progressing with regard to hopefully gaining access to either the Chinese or the US markets? I know that they have been ones that we've been alluding to, and hopefully, you know, making a little bit of progress on. But has there been any update that you know of more recently?
Yeah, and I suppose that the aim is just to get us access to as many markets as possible, just to spread the just to increase the value of the carcass, and get us as high a value return as possible. As we said, like China and US getting access to it has been discussed now for several years. Just there's been delays due to COVID and other issues, but we're continuing to engage with the department on them. In regards to the Chinese market, there's been some increased discussion and activity around that since Simon Company sort of met with his Chinese equivalent there at the start of the month. So there's been a lot more engagement and discussion around that in the last few weeks. And we've been engaging with the processors directly just in the last few weeks, just to make sure that they're market ready if market access does come online. So hopefully we can hit the ground running whenever that access comes through.
Okay, very good, Seamus, thank you. And one very last question for you, Seamus, that I have in front of me anyway, unless another one pops up. But with regard to the free trade agreement that we've heard a good bit about in the last week or two between the UK and Australia, is this a cause for concern, even in the medium term, as more product potentially comes in to the UK from that producer?
Yeah, I suppose, to be honest, there's probably so many unknowns just in relation to that. The UK is a net importer of sheep meat anyway, with regard, but usually it's just been from New Zealand. So any increase in what they're importing from Australia will probably just offset some of what they've previously been getting from New Zealand. Now, I think the quota they've been awarded is somewhere in the region of 25,000 tonne, and then gradually increasing over 10 years. Now, the one issue may be that the UK may then have more sheep meat to export itself. If it's an importing product, they do tend to import a cheaper product and then export their higher value product to the EU. But I suppose it's sort of the unknown, because with the changes in legislation and Brexit and everything, there's forecasts of market reduction in production of sheep meat in the UK. So it's very much unknown how it will impact us. But even saying that, the UK remains an important market for Irish sheep meat. I think our exports were somewhere in the region of 65 million to them last year. They got off to a bit of a slower start this year, but it's still a very important market for us. So it's an issue that we'll be keeping a very close eye on.
Yeah, thanks very much, Seamus. And of course, we know that the New Zealanders haven't filled their EU quota for many years. So, you know, just because the quota is there, hopefully, doesn't necessarily mean that they'll fill it either. Eleanor, I have a couple of questions for you. You haven't gotten off fully in the clear, but hopefully you might be able to touch on these ones if that's okay.
Sure.
Can you give us an indication of how many sheep farmers going through the audit process maybe had issues or non-compliances versus the number that were eligible and got fully certified?
Sure. So with the closeout offering that we have, an audit takes place, the closeouts or the non-compliances are identified, and then the farmer is given 30 days to close those out. So really getting from the audit through the closeout period and not reaching certification, even in the audits that were completed this year for beef and lamb farmers, about 4,100 audits for the lamb audits were beef and lamb, excuse me. Only about 40% or 40 farms, or 1%, sorry, are not reaching the certification standard at the end of the closeout period. So really we see a lot higher level of success of getting to that certified certification status with the implementation of the closeout period.
Perfect, brilliant. Thanks, Eleanor. And I have a question here about the sustainability survey that you touched about, the lamb carbon footprint model that's being introduced this summer. But just a query, within that sustainability survey, are we looking at any other things other than carbon footprint? We're being asked, we know that lamb is produced in a kind of a very natural way, and in a lot of cases it's a fully grass-based system, and in many cases it's a very extensive kind of a system. So does it look at other kind of environmental factors as well as the carbon assessment? Eleanor, the question is.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are other sections in the sustainability survey that are not just related to the productivity aspect. We will be able to capture, I suppose, the grazing season of sheep farmers to make that comparable to what the grazing season of the beef systems are and the dairy systems. That'll be an additional output to help promote the lamb market. And additionally, then we'll be collecting data on the habitats that are available on or recognized on the farm, whether those habitats are in nationally or internationally conserved areas. So we'll be able to track or maybe link in that extensive aspect for sheep farmers and biodiversity as well as an additional output. And then other areas related to their economic situation, the social sustainability, whether they're full-time or part-time, or whether they're able to use contractors to alleviate the labor situation, maybe more applicable on a more diverse enterprise that has beef, dairy and lamb. But there'll be certainly a lot more metrics that we'll be able to link back for sheep farmers with the sustainability survey. And in addition to that, at the moment, the dairy members of ESTAS and the beef members of ESPLAS are receiving a farm feedback report, which goes through efficiency details of their carbon footprint. And we aim to, after about a year of data collection and lamb carbon footprint creations, we'll be able to generate a similar farmer feedback report for lamb members as well, to go through the carbon footprint details, how it's broken down, and then hopefully generate some of that data like the grazing season and how it compares either scheme-wise or compare it to our competing countries. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Eleanor. And it's going to be a wealth of data, obviously, for us to leverage and to incorporate into our marketing material as well for Irish lamb. So really looking forward to all of that coming on stream. And I have a question back to you, Seamus, and I'll go to Brian then for our very last question. And I appreciate folks, we're doing nicely now on time, but we won't keep you over the time now, hopefully. But a question for Seamus in relation to maybe the QA drive. Wondering what's the kind of proportion of maybe, again, Eleanor touched on it, the lambs that are QA versus non-QA. But would we have an indication of what proportion of lambs are coming to the factories direct versus via a mart, as a kind of an intermediary, perhaps as finished lambs? And another kind of observation was, I suppose, through producer organizations, would we have an indication there of, the number of farmers that are maybe, or the number of lambs even perhaps, being marketed through producer organizations as opposed to direct to the meat plants? And again, look, this is kind of being thrown at you, so you may not have it on the tip of your tongue, and we can always come back anyway afterwards and publish some of this and come back to the individual if we don't have it.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't have a breakdown of what's coming through from marts or producer organisations or direct from farm, so it's something we'll have to revert back to. As Eleanor has touched on, there's about 60% of the sheep killed in 2020 were quality assured, and there's obviously a variance across processors in that proportion. I suppose in selling quality assured lambs through the mart, there is an opportunity there, even for a store lamb producer if he's producing forward store lambs. The quality assurance scheme just requires them to be on a QA farm for the last 42 days. So if you're selling forward store lambs, there'll always be demand there for a man that wants a short keep lamb to buy in a QA lamb and move them on then into the factory with the quality assured status. But no, we can come back with those couple of queries, a breakdown on that.
Yeah. And again, it might be useful, Ori, to address it in the context of, we can underline the additional benefit to the industry, which is significant in terms of being able to market that Irish lamb product as quality assured, carry the Bord Bia quality mark, again, to be able to promote it then more effectively, as opposed to, just lamb arriving into the factory without quality assurance, it just makes it more difficult, Seamus, doesn't it?
Yeah, as Eleanor's pulled out some of the important aspects of the QA scheme and the marketability then that it gives us in selling our Irish lamb. It basically gives us a proof point that there's no point in saying that we produce lamb naturally and sustainably, but we need to be able to prove that then when we're dealing with big customers in Europe, and increasingly that's what they're asking for. You know, they're getting 95% of their beef through the QA scheme, and they're asking questions as to why can't we get quality assured lamb as well. And up until now, there probably hasn't just been the enough of it to service, you know, year round, particularly some of these larger customers, but we're coming under increasing pressure and queries from some of these customers in wanting a sustainably produced product, and the QA scheme gives us the means to provide that assurance.
Yeah, okay, thanks very much, Seamus. As I say, we'll revert in terms of an update and maybe some follow-up on some of those additional data if we can get our hands on that, which we should be. And very final question is one for you, Brian, and a very strong interest there around your lambing percentage. So it's all mature ewes, as I understand it. You don't lamb down ewe lambs, do you? They're all
No.
2-year-olds kind of lambing down or more, yeah?
Yeah. I used to lamb down the ewe lambs up till 2018, the year the drought, and I wasn't happy with the condition of the ewe lambs that year, so I didn't breed them, and I just haven't gone back breeding them again. They tend to lamb down at the very end of the season when you're physically tired. So it just, for me, I just took them out and I used them as a clean-up crew around the farm then, just to clean out paddocks and not put pressure on ewes and lambs that they can move on and let the hoggets in then to finish cleaning out the fields.
Very good. So you're working with a mature flock then, you're getting good lambing percentages, I'd say.
Yeah. We're scanning 1.92 and we're lambing down 1.8 or 1.75, you know, in around that number there. So we are.
Brilliant.
And you get a few losses then, but we're not far off of it then at weaning time, so we're not.
Excellent, very good. And I have a question around what's your opinion around, you know, meeting market specs and, you know, in terms of carcass weights, what do your carcass weights average, and would you have many of them that kind of go over the maybe the limit is the query here from one of the.
I think on the very first draft in the year is where I tend to have the few that are gone out of spec on the heavy side, but after that then I'm weighing lambs every 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, so I'm fairly tight on keeping them in spec. I'd have an average carcass weight of in around the 20 kilos there. I find if I start going for that little bit heavier carcass, I have too many lambs going over the weight range. So I tend to kind of keep it a little bit tighter on it, but still I don't want them underfleshed either. You know, the 20 kilos there, it's allowing for the few that are on the heavy side, and you'd have very few on the light side when you are drafting so regularly
like that, yeah. And a query as well, Brian, about your carcasses. Are you breeding for U grades, they're asking, or are you happy with, you know, having a fairly high proportion of R grade lambs in the mix? Do you think the incentive is good enough for U grade lambs, or what's your opinion on that?
I suppose, to be honest, the majority of lambs are grading R3s, so it's bang in kind of where the market wants them.
Yeah.
I will have a proportion of U grades as well, but I mean the R3 is kind of the standard that they're looking for. If you have the U grades, well and good, but you're not going to be unless I find with the numbers I'm running, if I was trying to be getting all U3s, I'm probably going to spend more time with difficult lambings in the spring.
And
I'm just trying to reduce workload then as well. So that's part of the reason that I haven't gone back to lambing the ewe lambs. It's workload and trying to be a bit smarter how I produce the lambs.
Exactly. No, that's perfect. Really appreciate that, Brian, and thanks very much for that update. I think that's the end of our questions, and thanks very much everyone for joining us this evening. Really appreciate it. So from me and my colleagues and on behalf of Bord Bia, really grateful for your participation. Hope you enjoyed our first sheep farmer webinar. And we look forward to being in contact anyway later in the year. So all the very best in your farming endeavours, and we wish you every good luck. And thanks again.